for whatever reason, and I mean, you've mentioned, I think obviously what would happen, you're right that the 12-week scan is often the point where a lot of medical conditions can be picked up. So women with money would ask to have that scan at 11 weeks. I mean, that would be the first thing that would happen. The second thing that would happen would be that those women who wanted to have an abortion, whether that was for medical reasons or whether that was for what Bernadette likes to call social reasons, but things like the relationship turning violent, their lives being at threat, things like their job falling apart, losing their home, something going horribly wrong with an existing child, not being able to cope, not being able to make ends meet, these kind of very real reasons, women would travel. And indeed also those women who simply didn't want to be pregnant. What would happen is that you'd end up with what we've actually got now in Ireland, which is absolutely disgusting, which is where abortion becomes a class issue, because right now women who've got money and who are well educated, who want an abortion, they can access one very easily. They hop on a Ryanair flight.
But you've already said they're more expensive, but anyway.
But exactly, so what we're saying is that it's working class women, it's poor women who are being denied those things, and then their lives are being made even worse because now they've got an extra mouth to feed in an already incredibly difficult situation. So we're just trapping a certain class of women in deeper and deeper poverty.
That we can deal with. There are circumstances that can be addressed with support in all those cases. Destroying a human life in the cases that Kate is discussing here is never a necessity. It's never a necessity.
So let me just say, you won't solve any of those problems by forcing a woman to remain pregnant when she doesn't want to be. Go and solve all those problems. Do.
But when you talk about Ireland, the figure for women traveling is actually decreasing. It's decreasing.
I am absolutely behind initiatives to reduce poverty, to give women more options in their life, and I absolutely think that if we did that, if we had more support for parents of disabled children, more support for all people in those, I absolutely think we would see lower numbers of abortions. But we shouldn't solve these problems by marching in there and saying, no, you no longer have the right to choose.
Let's take the caller. I'm going to take the caller.
By destroying life either.
Okay, I'll take the caller. The reason I brought that up, which I tried and catch before the end of the programme, is this whole issue of discriminating against the disabled, but we'll pick it up after Emily's call. Emily, thank you for waiting.
I have my views, which I will not express just now, but I'm happy to do so. But it's another area of the whole thing, that from 1968 until 2010, I see that there were 7 million and 3,416 abortions in the UK. So what is the problem? Why we are an aging population, why people are now being forced to work longer hours and longer years, because we have destroyed a whole 7,000
million.
7 million. Okay, and so what are we doing? So why are we doing it? Why are we doing it? I put it down to selfishness. We want to do what we want to do with our lives. And, who are we accountable to? Well, I could go on and on and on, but, let's face it. I mean, what are we doing economically? We have destroyed all these potential, wage earners who will support us, and now the aging population, and we have problems with the aging population, and all the care homes and all of this is charging us so much. That's just another area.
Okay. Yeah, well, you have raised an important point, and that is the scale of it. Is there a scale that's unacceptable? Could we do it better, to actually somehow reduce, the vast quantity? I think it's something like 45 million a year worldwide.
Yeah, 1 in 3 women in the UK has had an abortion. And people always ask me, is this too many abortions? Well, the right number of abortions is 1 for every woman who wants one. That's all there is to say on that front. Now, that said, we're having this conversation about abortion as though it happens in a vacuum, and of course it doesn't. Abortion is something that happens after crisis pregnancy has happened. Abortion is one of the options that a woman has in a situation of crisis pregnancy. Nobody goes out deliberately trying to get pregnant so they can have an abortion. That's not how this thing works. So crisis pregnancy happens, and then some women from crisis pregnancy choose abortion, others choose adoption, and others choose motherhood. Those are the options laid out to women in crisis pregnancy. So can we be doing something to reduce the number of crisis pregnancies? Yeah, we totally can, and I'm behind every initiative to do that. I think that we should make contraception available much more widely. It should be free. I was in Sweden about 2 weeks ago, and I was in a bar. There was a big bowl of condoms in the bar, and I said, can I take some? They're so expensive in England. And she said, why are they expensive? Do you want teenage pregnancies? And I was like, exactly. I totally agree. They should be free. And we should be doing more to support women who do want to continue with their pregnancies. We should be making sure that women are not being discriminated against in the cuts, which is what we're seeing now. We should be making sure that we build schools and hospitals and Sure Start centres and all these things. We should be making childcare widely available. We should extend maternity leave. We should bring in proper paternity leave. I mean, make me Prime Minister, Tim, and I will sort these things out. And you will see a dramatic drop in the number of abortions. But what you will see as well is that I will absolutely insist that the right number is one for every woman who wants one, because there's always going to be somebody who slips through the cracks, and she should be allowed to run her life the way that she wants to.
Okay. Bernadette, I wanted to ask about Jeremy Hunt. You know, he said when he became Health Secretary, he wanted to reduce it. Personal opinion, because others have other opinions. Would you be prepared to accept a reduction to a certain upper limit? Or from your perspective, would you say no abortion from conception is acceptable?
Absolutely. That would be discriminating against a child at 12 weeks, discriminating against a child from conception. I think it's vitally important that we introduce legislation that we have in Ireland, in the north of Ireland, where unborn children are protected. If we lower the age limit, yeah, we might save more unborn children, and that's vitally important. And I know that pro-life organisations obviously want to work to protect as many children as possible, and that age limit, because it's like we're looking at, we can see viability, we can see the goalposts moving. We know that babies can feel pain in the womb. We know that women who maybe are given bad prognosis, poor prognosis at 20 weeks, I think there's a reality, it's not 12 weeks. Women are not finding out that the child has a disability at 12 weeks. It's usually the 20-week scan where the baby is older. There's a bonding process, which is very difficult for women who have had abortions. I believe that life should be protected from the very moment of conception right through to natural death. I think human rights should begin in the womb. A child in the womb is formed at that moment of conception, and it should have the same respect throughout the whole 9 months, the same protection.
I'll let you come in, but after the emails. We have some format in the debate, and we're going to go back to Howard now in the control room to read some of your text messages.
As you can see, this is still quite a fiery debate, and it's quite understandable from both parties. But emails and texts that are coming in, let me read you a few. Jan writes in and says, I had an abortion many years ago, and like the pro-choice speaker, was incredibly relieved at the time and thereafter. However, it is hard not to feel guilty as a Christian, and I worry that this was murder, and it feels like a big black stain on my soul. Is the destruction of a small cell cluster such a big issue, says Jan. Going to the next one, and obviously I can't read them all because there's far too many, but forgive me for not getting that opportunity tonight. But Jan Crombie also says, while I agree that many women want to have children, a smaller number do not want to have children and should not be forced to have an unwanted child. The problem for me is what the biblical view of this is. What does the Bible say? Is abortion murder? Does the fetus have a soul? I want to end with this one, and this is from Janet, who writes in, and it's a question really. Is there no evidence of if there is no evidence of gender selective abortion, as your guest proclaimed, could she explain why certain cities such as Bradford hospitals refuse to let patients know from the scans what the gender is of their unborn child? This has been common practice for such a long time. Question.
People who are opposed to abortion have, done this investigative sting, done this journalistic sting, have hyped up the story and have frightened medical centres into being afraid to give women information about their pregnancy, and that's really sad. I mean, and this is the thing when we talk about all these different limits and regulations around abortion, is that as soon as we put these limits, what we're really saying to women is go and lie to your doctors, because ultimately, women continue to have abortions even in countries where it's illegal, and what happens is their lives are then at risk, and we see women dying around the world. And I have a very good friend who grew up without a mother for exactly that reason. Before the 67 Abortion Act came in, a good friend of mine again, Anne, she was an Irish woman living in London, and she had a backstreet abortion, and as a result she had a prolapsed uterus, and she spent large parts of her life in pain. And the reality is that as soon as we criminalise abortion, we say to women, how can you get around the rules? Because women know what they want and what's right for them. And if continuing with a pregnancy all the way to term isn't right for them, that, you know, it's a big decision to continue with a pregnancy. So if it's not right, they will find a way of getting around that law, and that can be tragic, it can be really horrible.
Okay, can I just follow up on this this disabled thing? You gave the extreme example. Bernadette answered from her position about, you know, the trauma on the mother as well. Not taking an extreme example of disability, taking Down syndrome or others. How do you face, you know, people who are disabled and are alive now, not in the womb, and those of families who have children who are Down syndrome? You know, how do you continue to argue the case, you know, without, you know, it appearing discriminatory?
Well, I do think that when we have a situation where after 24 weeks abortion is legal only if you can demonstrate that the fetus is seriously disabled, I do think that that's discriminatory, but I think that as I've been fairly clear, the way to solve that is to take that term limit away from everybody else and just say people can make that choice. Now, I also think that when we see women who've chosen to terminate because of fetal abnormalities, in actual fact, we might see a lot less of that if, as I've suggested, we had a lot more support for people with disabilities in our society. Now, finally, on the subject of disability and abortion, let me just say that we talk all day and all night about, you know, a fetus or an embryo that has got problems and abnormalities. Fair enough, and I think every individual woman should make the choice about whether that's whether she can handle that in her life or not. What we forget is that actually one group of women who often really need abortion services are women who have a disability themselves. And in actual fact, women who have already medical issues going on, a lot of disabled women would be unable to get pregnant if they, you know, because they don't know how it's going to pan out for them. They're unable to get pregnant unless they know that abortion option is there. So the very fact that abortion is available means that some women, especially women with some very serious disabilities, are able to actually get pregnant in the first place, knowing that if it doesn't turn out to be something their body can handle, they will have the option to get out of that situation.
So, but on this whole disability thing, you know, your first argument was that basically you shouldn't be an incubator, and now we've moved into an area where a woman has a right, if her child is disabled in the womb, my terminology, excuse me, she has a right because of her emotional or feeling that she can't cope with that child. She has a right to terminate because it's disabled.
You're misunderstanding me, Tim. I'm saying that a woman has a right to not be an incubator if she doesn't want to be, and that nobody has a right to force her for whatever reasons. And we could talk all day about what the right and the wrong reasons.
I understand that one, but the other arguments.
But we're talking about what you know, is it okay for her to make the decision for this reason or that reason or the other reason?
That's the point.
Well, you know, frankly, I would flip that around and say, what is the right reason to force a woman to be an incubator? Is it because you're fighting for disabled rights? Is it about gender? Is it this? Is it that?
The one about, you know, how do you feel about a woman deciding to terminate a pregnancy because the child is disabled?
Well, I feel that probably. I mean, it depends who she is. Who is this woman? Every single woman. And I guess that question could only be asked by a man, if I might be so frank, Tim. In the sense that, I don't know a single woman who wanted an abortion for exactly one reason. Every woman in the situation of crisis pregnancy takes 100 factors into consideration. Would my mum help? Have we got enough money? What about my partner? What about that other guy I used to date? Would he help me out? What about the medical situation? What facilities are available? Blah, blah, blah. And one of the things will be, what kind of baby am I having? Is it going to need extra support? Is it going to need extra help? Have I got those resources? Does the government? All of those things will come into, as well as, what's my religion? What do I think about this morally? As well as, literally everything comes into that equation. So to talk about having one single reason, I think that...
Well, just interested in your view on that particular point, but we've got Gary on the line.
Okay.
Thanks for answering. Gary, welcome to the programme. Please fire away. We've only got 10 minutes left of the programme. Gary. If Gary isn't there, we'll carry on.
We have a 10-minute silence.
Yeah, I don't know. It's, what's your view on this whole issue of the disabled?
Talk about disabilities. You know, how can Kate look at a disabled person in the face and say, you know, your life has value, because she's in agreement with abortion throughout the whole 9 months of pregnancy for any reason? Because really, what's basically, well, because that's exactly what you're saying there. You
have a
agree
right to abort a healthy fetus if she wants to.
yeah, a healthy unborn child.
Well, the reason I asked it was
Because
purely
yeah,
because
So
the
you really
disabled are the
agree-
most
yeah.
vulnerable, and that's
so you
why
don't
I.
agree at all. You agree in abortion in all cases.
Yeah, that's
For
how I
disability,
agree.
yes,
Where a
for
woman
disability, yes.
Or for any, yeah.
Where
So
a woman wants
you would
one,
want to
where a woman
discriminate.
wants
So
one,
you're in favour
where
of
a woman wants one.
discrimination. Yeah, you're in favour of discriminating
No, I'm
against
not at
other
all.
human beings,
No.
smaller human beings.
No.
Who are less, really,
oh.
what you're not in favour of protecting life at all.
Yes, I'm in favour of discriminating against fetuses and in favour of adult